Bonjour, French 1 students. Today's lesson is all about adverbs of frequency, or known better to you guys as telling how often you do something. This goes along with your liking and disliking sentences in that a lot of times when you say that you like something, you say that you do it very often, whereas if it's not your favorite thing to do, you typically say that you do it rarely or even never. So that's what these words are all about today. Go ahead and let's get started taking some notes. First thing I want you to realize is, of course, when I refer to an adverb of frequency, they talk about how often you do something. Adverbs describe how you do verbs. They add to the verbs, as in how you do certain actions. And if they're frequency adverbs, then they tell how often you do something. The first thing I need to show you that they're going to talk about in your book is how you would even ask somebody about whether or not they like to do something regularly. Remember, the way you say do you like is just by saying tu aimes. Literally, you're saying you like. You can fill in any activity at all that you would like, and then if you add the word régulièrement means regularly. So if you say something like tu aimes aller au cinéma régulièrement, you're saying do you like to go to the movies regularly, as in do you usually do that, is that something you do a lot? The reason why aller au cinéma is underlined is so that you realize that you don't always have to ask somebody about going to the movies. You could ask them, tu aimes danser régulièrement? Do you like to dance regularly? Tu aimes nager régulièrement? Do you like to swim regularly? Any of those activities that we learn the words for in class can go where that underlined phrase is and make a complete and logical sentence. When you go to answer these kinds of questions about whether or not you do things regularly, there's a whole list of types of things that you can say. You could say souvent, which is often. You could say de temps en temps, which is from time to time. You could say rarement, which is rarely. You could say toujours, which is always. We already saw régulièrement, which is regularly. Or you could also use the word jamais, which means that you never do whatever that activity is. So now that you've got the words, we need to talk about how you use them to actually answer this question and can use them in conversation and in complete sentences. So here's some examples. First example, and go ahead and jot down what this means in English so you can refer back to your notes. If a first person, in this case Julie, were to say to somebody, tu aimes nager régulièrement? Do you like to swim regularly? One possible answer, of course there are many, I'm just giving you one sample idea of how this could work, is if she asks Luke, do you like to swim regularly? He could say, non, jamais, which means no, never. I never like to swim. Here's a couple more examples for you. If you wanted to just talk about yourself in general, a really logical thing to say here is what Emile is saying, in that he says, je n'aime pas danser, je danse rarement, which means I don't like to dance, I rarely dance. Makes sense. If you don't like to, you probably don't do it very often. Another conversation here is an example. If somebody doesn't ask, do you do something regularly? If they just say, do you like doing something? In this case, Ludwig is asking, tu aimes jouer aux cartes? Do you like to play cards? You can go ahead and throw in an adverb anyway just to reinforce how often or how much you like doing that activity by saying how often you do it. So if somebody says, do you like to play cards? And you really don't, you could say non, which of course means no, I don't like to, and then elaborate by saying je joue rarement aux cartes. I rarely play cards, in fact. The big thing I wanted you to notice about these two phrases is that they use these adverbs in a complete sentence and they don't necessarily go in the same place that we say in English. Take a look here up here. Instead of saying I rarely dance and putting rarement in front of it, or here instead of saying I rarely play, notice in both times the rarement comes after the activity. So you actually have I dance rarely and I play rarely cards, which doesn't make any sense there. Up here we can kind of put it in both places in English. It's important that you realize that in French they don't put the adverbs in the same spot that we do in English. A lot of times they actually go after the verb. The reason why I point this out is if you go to read a sentence and you try to translate it word for word, like this one for example, you're going to sound really silly when you say something like I play rarely cards, which doesn't make any sense in English. It's just one of those grammatical differences where they put things in a slightly different order than we do. All right, last example here. If somebody were to say, tu aimes aller au café régulièrement? Do you like to go to restaurants or cafes regularly? You could definitely say, oui, souvent, yes, often, if you really like to go out to eat. Pretty short note set, but make sure that you jot down any questions that you may have and come ready to work next class.